Hello and welcome to the Bestseller Experiment, a special deep dive episode recorded exclusively for our patrons on Patreon and academies in the Bestseller Academy. And today's dive is into the mysterious world of search engine optimization. And to guide us through these depths is Kelsey E Meyers from Writer's Link. Kelsey was first introduced to the world of search engine optimization, which we're going to call SEO from now on for brevity's sake, back in 2016 at the IT department of her undergraduate university. Kelsey went to a writers' conference a few years ago and something clicked. Audience, brand, and an online presence were so much more important to the writing world than she realized. Yet no one was talking about organic traffic, mobile usability, or user experience. There was a gap that needed to be filled. Thus, Writer's Link was created to help writers establish an organic online presence to reach wider audiences and share their stories, curated websites that can be found whether through search engines or during an agent's inquiry and all that good stuff. Basically, SEO is important if you want to be found online. Kelsey, welcome to the podcast. How are you?
I'm well. How are you?
Very, very good indeed. And I was just saying before the recording, this is going to sound so nerdy, but it's so nice to talk to someone about SEO, which
it is, especially within the writing publishing field. It's so refreshing.
Yeah, it's not something that really gets... I know people in marketing departments get excited about it, and certain people in publicity departments get excited about it. The rest of the world sort of rolls their eyes and goes, well, you lot get on with it. But I think authors need to know about this stuff. So can you tell us what SEO is and why authors need to think more about it?
Absolutely. So the basic purpose of SEO is to be able to rank better on Google or search engines. Another way to say it is to be able to be visible online. When someone is searching for, say, young adult science fiction authors, you're going to want it to be seen for that, what we call a search query. And that's basically what search engine optimization is. I basically work with websites to help them find the right queries so that they can be found, and making sure that their websites function according to Google standards, specifically, usually Google, as it is the monster it is today. It is the dominant search engine, but making sure the website works as it needs to is just as important as what queries or keywords you include in your content.
Okay, keywords. We'll get onto keywords. I mean, this is one of these things most authors... I'm imagining a lot of people listening to this aren't even aware of keywords or what they can do or that kind of thing. So it's something that, again, a friend of mine, a guy called Jeremy Mason, who sort of clued me into this, because I used to just put keywords that would just be the thing. If I was writing about a film, I just put the title of the film or whatever. But now what I've started doing is asking the sort of questions that people ask on Google, because Google is all about providing answers, isn't it? So, for example, yes. It's 10 years ago since we started filming a film that I wrote called Robot Overlords, and I'm blogging about that 10-year anniversary. But in the keywords, I'm putting things like, where was Robot Overlords filmed? Who were the cast of Robot Overlords? Who wrote Robot Overlords? That's the sort of thing that helps draw people towards you, isn't it? You have to kind of think in that mindset.
Yes, absolutely. So Google, especially in the most recent years, it's very question-based. They really like to give people quick, short, simple answers, which it also counteracts because it likes long pieces of content. If anything is shorter than 100 words, Google is less likely to show it within search engines, because one phrase that I've been familiar with in the SEO industry is content is king. So Google loves content, both written word as well as media content. So including those types of keywords is what we would call a long tail keyword. It's basically just a very long phrase. That's much more narrow and specific than just saying the movie's title. And you're more likely to be seen for those types of those questions and those long tail phrases than you were if you were just trying to write an article about the title of a movie.
Mm-hmm. So if I'm an author and I might not even have a book published yet, but I want to sort of start building a following, maybe draw people to my newsletter on my website, what are the kind of things that are going to draw people? What are the strategies I can use to build that following?
Yeah, I think one of the first things to consider is, what do you want your website to be doing? What do you want to tell people? What do you want to share with them? Is it going to be what we call a profile, almost vanity website, where it's just one page and people can know who you are, what you do, and how to contact you? Those are best for agent inquiries or sharing your information with fellow authors at writers' conferences. But let's say you have a blog, and you want to share short stories on it or tips for young writers. Both of those situations, you're going to need to address your SEO strategy differently, because one is one page, one is multi-page, but they also serve different purposes. On one hand, again, you're sharing your contact information. On the other, and with a blog, you're sharing more of your insights and your thoughts, trying to share just what you know about your industry or your book, your genre. For both of those, even if once you kind of establish what the purpose of your website is going to be, and what you want to tell people, then you can move on to kind of the nitty-gritty of SEO. And one of the most easy, low-hanging fruit is the title, the meta description, the headings, and what we call alt text or alternative text. So the titles is what you see when you search up. How you put a search into the search engine. The little blue underlined part is the title, and that usually says what is the topic of your page and your brand. So for an author, it could be, Jane Doe author, science fiction fantasy author. Pretty self-explanatory, but you've got your brand and you've got what you do. Underneath is a very small paragraph, usually 1 to 2 sentences, that gives a little more context for people who are searching. You can say where you're based. You can say the title of your book name. This just gives people more reason to click on that title. And those are where you're going to try and use your keywords, like we mentioned earlier. And those ones are going to be more, we call high-level general topic keywords. So in the case of a movie, it would be the movie's title plus if you have an article specific about the location it's based. You could say, was it Robo
Overlords? Yeah.
Robo Overlords. Robo Overlords wasn't made in Wales. Was it made in the US? And already you're capturing a question and you're drawing in people's interest. The next one would be within headings, and that's basically just an outline. What are the main points of your piece of content? Your title, obviously, but then is there a sub-point? Are there sub-points? Very similar to how you would write an essay within school. You basically want to be able to give both users as well as Google a really quick, easy way to say, this is the crux of my content. This is what I'm going to be talking about. So you understand that it's organized for both user and Google. And then alt text is both an accessibility feature as well as a search feature. Alt text is basically kind of hidden, I wouldn't say code, but it's a hidden description for images. And it basically describes the images to Google and those who have visual impairments. So if you have a picture of a dog playing in the park, it would be dog chasing frisbee. Pretty self-explanatory. You already have an image in your head. And that's another area where you can add keywords if it's natural. But for the most part, it's how making it as accessible to people as possible over a variety of functions.
Is that different to the subtitle that you might put underneath a caption that you might put underneath a photo? It is different to that.
It is different.
Okay, I've not.
So
been
you can
using
do both.
It. I need to start using that.
Yes. No, it's good. It's one of those like small, like I said, low hanging fruit that can be a really easy fix. But Google, especially right now, loves media. It loves images. It loves movies or videos. And it's more likely to, in some cases, show content that has more media with it than the content without. And so being able to describe that media content to Google is beneficial for search, but again, it's beneficial for those who don't see as well.
Yeah, very good. And you said Google at the moment. I mean, this stuff is always changing. It's always evolving. How are we supposed to keep up with this? Because you set something up. I mean, one of your services is you go into people's websites and you sort of go and tidy them up and improve their SEO. And I got a website that's my books my blog is sort of 15 years old or whatever, but my book website is about 3 years old, and I thought it was in pretty good shape. And once you start poking, it's like, oh, that doesn't work anymore, and that needs fixing. And it's like sort of keeping a boat at sea, isn't it? You're constantly scraping barnacles off the side. So in terms of keeping up and optimizing this stuff and keeping on top of it, is there sort of good housekeeping that we can do?
Yeah, it's what you just said, like housekeeping. Is very much like taking care of a house or taking care of a boat, making sure things are running as they should be. And this is where you also go back to why you want a website. What's the purpose of a website? If your purpose is to be found through Google or through search engines, that's going to have a completely different strategy than if you just want a piece of land on the internet. If you just want a space to call your own, that you can control the narrative and not have the fear of being your account taken down, such as social media. Again, those are going to take very different strategies and different ways to do SEO. If you just want a piece of land on the internet, all you need to focus on basically is, does your website function properly, and can people understand your website? Can they navigate it? If you have a 3-page website, can people get to your about page without the menu? Do you have links within your content? And if it's more of a blog and you're wanting people to start to discover you, maybe start creating an audience for a newsletter, that's when you're going to want to try to use some SEO tools and really delve into research within what is your audience searching for and how can you reach them. Excellent.
You mentioned links there. Is there such a thing as too many links?
Absolutely.
Right. Okay. Tell me more.
Yes.
Because I think I might be guilty of this.
It's okay. I have also been guilty of this with different clients that I have worked with. But the main thing that links do is it shows one phrase that I have learned within the industry, which may or may not be true anymore, but I'm going to stick to it, is if it's good for the user or good for the reader, it's good for Google.
Right.
So with links, you want to be able to show users, hey, this other page is also really relevant to what you're looking at. I want you to see this, or you should see this. And it's a way in the back end as well to show just how pages are related. If everything is interconnected, then Google, the crawler, is able to move between pages much easier than if one is what we call an orphan page. If there are no links to it, but it's within your website, how are people supposed to find it? If you're searching for a needle in a haystack, but if you have links, it's a little more like maybe a needle on a string.
Yeah, that's good. I think that's where I am at the moment, actually, but I have in the past. It's like, even if I mention just someone's name, I'll hyperlink that.
Absolutely.
And it's just
and that does help too. To link to another person's website. That kind of goes into another very deep dive of SEO in what's called backlinks and link equity. So by linking to another author's website or linking to a resource, again, you're saying this is somebody or something that I want my readers to see, that I want them to look at. And it also tells Google, this is important, and I see this as an authority. I see this as something that is shareable and that has value. It's not spam or fake nor clickbait.
Yeah. Very good. Excellent. Well, shall we move on? We've got a few listener questions. I think there's some crossover with what we've already discussed, but I'd like to go through these anyway. So Laura Shepherd said, what's the difference in terms of results between having a decent website with the key information and having one which is optimized with analytics and metadata and everything. And you were talking there about just having that one page, which is kind of, here I am, this is me, which I do recommend authors set up, because Twitter, social media is all at the whims of these billionaire man babies at the moment, so they could vanish overnight.
Absolutely.
So at the very least, do have this one piece of the internet that is yours that you can take ownership of.
Yes.
What would you say are the basics there that Laura's talking about?
Yeah, I think going back to like that housekeeping type of analogy, having a website is like having a house. And SEO, at the basics of it, is being able to do small renovations on the house and posting signage of where you are. If you don't necessarily need people to know where you are, maybe you're living out in the country and you're fine with your quiet, but you maybe want signposts occasionally. That's where SEO comes in, and you can have these signals that help people find you easier. And for those who maybe want a little more of a designer house and they want to show it off, that's when you can add the garden and you can try to make it as beautiful as possible to attract people. That's basically what SEO is doing. SEO is a tool to support content initially, or to be found. It shouldn't be the reason why you create content. So this is not me saying go and make a blog so you can make SEO content and be found on Google. That's usually it's a recipe for disaster and chaos.
Right.
But SEO is a tool to be able to kind of elevate your websites, to be able to, in case someone does look up your brand, you want to be able to make sure that you're distinguished from other people. I think that's it goes into some other questions, but being able to become distinct from people in your genre, or maybe an author that sounds very close to you, that's what SEO can help you do, is make you distinct.
That's kind of segueing on to the next question here. Laura says this, and Julian Barr says it. Laura says, I have a very common name. Any tips for SEO in those circumstances? Julian Barr says, I have a book title which is similar but not identical to that of a very popular author in the same genre. Any tips to stand out? I thought my name was fairly unusual, but I found a markstay.com from an artist in Australia, a graphic artist. And I'm also in competition with a town in Ontario called Markstay Warren. Yeah. So, yeah. So, and I think they hate me because we're constantly sharing hashtags on Instagram all the time as well. So if there is a competitiveness to this, isn't there, to sort of be at the top of the search results, but I guess it's about relevance. With me, people in Ontario aren't looking for an author who writes about witches. They're looking to find out what's going on in their town. So I think we're okay there. But where you've got a title or a name that's a bit similar to another author or another book, how can we make ourselves distinct and not end up on the second or third page of the Google search results?
Yeah, especially for a name. One of the best ways to do it is to add more description to the title. So if your name is Jane Doe and there are many Jane Does, then maybe there's only one Jane Doe young adult fantasy author. That in itself will help. There could also include where you're based. If you're based in Wales, if you're based in Alabama, United States, people may be able to find you. If you're trying to find a local author, just having that location can also help to distinguish you from people within your genre. Within, like, say, the title, if you have a very similar title, so a murder mystery versus murder mysteries, adding your author name is kind of like adding your brand, saying, this is my book, Murder Mystery by Elaine Craig. And it's different than the Murder Mysteries TV show or the Murder Mysteries series by John Smith, because even just that little switch between who the author is and including that within your title or your heading is going to help, again, make you distinct from your counterparts.
When you say title and heading, are you talking about the website, blog posts? It's sort of every time you put something out there, you kind of need to, And that.
So when I'm saying title, I'm mostly referring to what we term is the SEO title. Usually, and I would recommend that be different than your heading. But in a lot of work, if you're saying you're going to be using WordPress, which is the most common, WordPress usually uses, you're creating a new piece of content, it has title at the very top. That's going to be your heading. And then usually there's at the very bottom, WordPress works with a tool called Yoast, which is where you can specify or customize your SEO title tag. And that's where both of those opportunities is two new opportunities to use a keyword. So if your title maybe mentions your location, but doesn't mention the genre that you're working in, then your heading can include your genre, your location, and your brand name, because the heading can be longer than the SEO type.
Right. Excellent. I'm learning all sorts of new stuff here. This is terrific.
I'm so glad.
I got a question from Christopher Wills. What are your top 3 tips to improve SEO for a writer's website in particular?
Yeah, top 3 tips. I think, again, it's going to be titles, meta descriptions, and headings. Those are going to be your top 3. Alt text is always important, but it's a lower level than the title and meta descriptions. To get to the nitty-gritty a little bit of SEO, there are what we call ranking factors. And these are elements of a website or a page that we can alter to be able to make it personalized for the user. So we're targeting that user with these ranking factors. Within those 3 that I just mentioned, titles and headings are ranking factors. And that's where you're going to want to put your most important keywords. That's where you're going to want to put your genre or your location. Descriptions, although they are not a ranking factor, which means that Google doesn't look at them to rank your website, it does help with what we call click-through rate. It helps users or readers click to the page, click through the page. And that's just as important as the ranking factors a lot of the times. So it's not something to disregard, but it is something to just keep in mind that if you can only do 2 out of the 3, focus on the titles and the headings. If you can do all 3 of them, titles, headings, and descriptions, that's going to be your basic foundational level to start.
Excellent stuff. Before we recorded, I did send you an article, and I don't know if you've had a chance to read it yet, but this was from a favourite website of mine and a podcast as well called Film Stories by a guy called Simon Brew, talking about the nature, the kind of thing that irks him about the way that people are kind of playing the gaming the system, the SEO techniques, where they will say things like, is Harrison Ford in the Indiana Jones film? Or things like that, things that, people are asking, and the answer is probably, well, yes. And then they're writing incredibly long articles, that content is king thing, and burying the answer in like the 5th paragraph. So you have to scroll through this stuff. Is that, and listeners, I'll put a link to this piece in the show notes so you can check it out. It's a really interesting article. Is this something that's changing and evolving? Is this something that Google is figuring out? Or do we have to become that kind of writer who says, have I written a crime novel? Click on this to find out. Right.
Yeah, no, it's a very interesting question. And the easy answer is no, you don't have to do that.
Great.
And Google, I can't say it doesn't like, but they prefer quality content.
Right.
They have done, as we mentioned earlier, SEO is constantly changing and the algorithm changes every single day. We, as SEOs, don't know those changes. We can only see the results of those changes and then react. And a lot of the times Google will only announce if they've made a very big core algorithm change that massively impacts people's traffic. All that to say, Google is constantly changing, and the way that they have viewed content has changed over even the last 6 years that I've been within it. Google wants to provide people with the right content. So having a page that just answers one question is seen as thin content. That's why people tend to include more verbiage, even if it is fluff, on the piece of content. But as readers, and I will say this as a user, it's extremely annoying to be clickbaited into an article and then see that it's really just nothing. I would much rather read a longer article like the one you shared, because it has an opinion, it has a voice, it's engaging. And so what I would say with that is the balance between, again, what do you want to say to people, and then how SEO is the way to how to reach those people. So if you want to be talking about the films Indiana Jones or Harrison Ford has been in, you could write an article about, and with a little description of each film that he has been in, maybe with your opinion. But within that, you can include those queries of, was Harrison Ford in Indiana Jones in the larger article, but rather than targeting that very, very specific question for the entirety of the article, look for the larger topic ahead of it and focus on that topic and then supplement questions.
Excellent. That's very encouraging, because the other thing as well, I guess we're going to have a period where, because of AI and Chat GPT, there are going to be people just flooding the net with these kind of articles, which I guess Google is going to have to address and figure out how to filter these things out, aren't they?
Yeah, at the moment, Google has said that they don't mind AI content as long as it's quality content. Again, that goes back to their quality guidelines. Their algorithm does, it tries to identify if someone is just spitting out content, but it's not relevant to what the website's about. Google's not going to like that. But if you're using AI as a tool and like as a supplement to maybe find an idea and then expand upon it, Google doesn't mind. And they're not requiring that you say, oh, this was AI generated. But the question of AI of, ChatGPT is one of the most efficient models out there right now, even in the SEO industry, and it's changed the game. And from what my family's always said too is if it makes life easier and it's simple to use, it's most likely here to stay. So my best advice with AI, at least that I'm following myself, is to see it as a tool, not as a solution.
Yes.
It can be used to supplement, to support, to kind of maybe give an edge to your articles or content, but it should never be the sole thing that you use. Because I still believe human-generated content, human-written content is still going to be superior to ChatGPT and AI. And there's also going to be those people who prefer human-written work over machine-written work, just as people like hardbound books versus ebooks. Yeah. It's going to be a preference. So the written word isn't going away, but how to access it and how to make it be seen is going to change. And that's where we kind of change the perspective of how do we use this new tool without going overboard.
Excellent stuff. Excellent. Christo has another question which kind of ties into this thing of visibility and he says, can one pay to have one's website appear higher in searches? If so, when one does a search, how can one tell that something appears high on the list just because someone has paid for the privilege? So is this because you do occasionally see sponsored results, is that right? Yeah, so you can sort of pay to advertise on Google to appear.
So for traditional search result, the simple answer is no. You can't pay to be above your competitive author's website or a publishing house. But can you invest in ads and be seen for very, kind of target those particular queries you want to be targeted for? Yes. And so to be able to see that, like you mentioned, it's a bold text right above the title, which is sponsored. And usually they come right at the very beginning of the website, or not website, sorry, the search results. And they have, this is another way that SEO has changed. Those have gotten much more frequent than ever before. There used to be only one or two, and now you can sometimes find results that have 4 ads before you actually get to a traditional, what we call an organic listing, which is frustrating. But Google is moving. We have to remember that Google now has moved into much more of a business model. They are there to make money, to make clicks. And so they're pushing their ad scheme. I don't know if scheme is the right word, but they're pushing the ads to be able to be seen much more than they ever did before. So that's one way to see if someone has targeted or, put money onto an ad saying, I want to be seen for this particular query, whether it's science fiction author or authors in Wales. Having an ad like that and having sponsored, how you're going to be able to see if someone has paid for that.
Yeah.
But for a typical listing, no, there's no way to pay to be the first. The only way that I know of is either to invest in SEO, whether that's learning on your own or working with a company like mine. It's kind of a roundabout way, in a sense, I guess, to pay for listings. But a lot of it, too, is going back to the housekeeping analogy. Sometimes you have to pay a professional to fix the gutters or make sure things are functioning as they need to.
Well, let's talk about that, shall we? Because just looking at the services that you offer, you can come and audit someone's website. You can look at competitors, and you can create websites. So, tell us a bit more about that. What can folks? How can they work with you, Kelsey?
Yeah, absolutely. So the main things that I usually like to start with is what we call an audit. Basically, an evaluation of what do you have and what do you want to have. And this is basically when I come in and I see, okay, are the pages working as they're supposed to? Are there links? What are some ways that we can improve, first, the functionality of the website, and then how can we improve the search portion of the website? And I have I have knowledge of technical SEO, content SEO, and at times local SEO, which may or may not apply to authors as much. It really depends on what you want to offer readers and team users. So that's sometimes where I start, and that's that audit can include either an existing one-page website, the vanity profile, or it can include a multi-page website. That can include a blog. That could maybe, if you're selling your books from your website, that's going to be a slightly different, audit or evaluation than if someone just has a 5-page website. So I come in, I evaluate, see what needs to be done, and then I help you get your website back to a foundational, functional level with an improvement in search.
Fantastic.
And so one of my other services is a maintenance subscription. And this is where I would come in and monthly or however much we agree to is I would come in and, again, I would check those titles and search elements on a page to make sure, one, that we're keeping up with people's interest and what they're searching for. So in case one thing that I found is I work with legal companies or legal firms in the U.S. sometimes. And in different places, attorney is the most common term versus lawyer. So knowing which term, even that some of that small nuance can help. And that's what I can do with the tools that I have, is to be able to see, are there any nuances that have changed? Are there any trends that we should hop on and kind of go from there?
Fantastic. Folks, you can find that at writerslinkllc.com. I'll put a link in the show notes so you can check that out. And we'll add some SEO and keywords as well to make it nice and visible. So, Kelsey, that's been absolutely brilliant. Thanks so much for taking the time to speak to us. I think maybe, shall we speak again in about a year? Because I imagine this will all have changed with the AI revolution and everything else that's going on. So, that's absolutely brilliant. So, Kelsey, thanks so much for speaking to us today, and hope to speak to you again real soon. Take care.
All right. Thank you.